All right, here we are, Kinesiology 230. This is chapter 17. This is presentation 6, and this is where we start to kind of turn the content away from plyometrics per se. And we talk more about speed training and sprint mechanics. Now, this presentation is going to be about speed training, mechanics, and physiology, etc. But I have a few things that I'm going to touch on in here. And when I said that you can spend pretty much an entire 8-week term about plyometrics, another 8-week term talking about speed development, I will tell you when you look at these two side by side, one of them you'll want to have a Modelo after watching it because of the music I play. But if you look at what happens over here in terms of recreational runners and the mechanics of running flat footed, collapsing the knee, the heel, there is no heel recovery. The heel recovery is how the heel tracks relative to the knee, and the heel recovery is recovered below the knee, is almost shin height. The shin itself is about parallel with the ground. The heel isn't even coming up near the butt. The hips are dropping down, there's collapsing. So, you kind of pick on this, but they're recreational runners at the end of the day. If we look at this one, this is Usain Bolt when he ran in the Olympics. And we just go here, get the Modelo music off. So if we go ahead and get to Mr. Bolt sprinting in the Olympics here, so come up 1 second. Notice the difference as they're sprinting where the heel height is. They're kicking themselves in the butt. Notice the contact patch on the ground. It's just the arch forward of the foot. The shin is not parallel with the ground when it comes up. The shin is actually a little bit more vertical. So my point to you is when we start talking about recreational runners versus elite level sprinters, and if you want to have your athletes become faster, you have to teach them the mechanics of running. And running like this, slow running, you're giving away a lot of energy into the ground by running flat footed. Whereas these sprinters are applying a large amount of force into a small contact patch in a very short amount of time, which is by definition more powerful. And you can see just the fluidity of movement, how high the knee lift is versus this over here. So I'm not going to belabor this too much because I could definitely talk about it forever and a day, but I want to move on to what the book wants to talk about. And with running technique itself, you have different drills that you use to go ahead and teach the movement pattern, but these ABC drills are really a concept of whole part whole, which I've talked about several times in this class. And the idea is to take a very complex movement and break it up into its main components and teach them and refine them. And as you do so, you put those back into the equation. And in theory, and really in practice, what happens is when you put those movement patterns together, they're more refined at that point. So the overall movement pattern is more refined. So during a sprint, you look at the amount of time that you spend on the ground and the ground contact forces that are involved. The less time you spend on the ground, the actual more power you're delivering into you're delivering force into the ground in a short amount of time, which means we're more powerful. And they talk about braking forces, and that's what you saw in that video over to the left. Those folks were running completely flat-footed, and they were losing so much energy to the ground. So these running technique drills, and these are just kind of rough ones that I've done before for another class. This is kinesiology. You talk about posture here. With good posture, you have eyes up, looking out the horizon. You're not slouching at all. Good neutral position in terms of the hips. Not that, not ever that. No way are you doing that and be fast. You can't. You have to have chest high, back flat, 100% all the time. And you have to learn how to be up on the balls of the feet. So by doing this, by doing balls of the feet, you're teaching yourself how to be on a smaller contact patch, which is more unstable, which is to your advantage, by the way, and you're raising your center of gravity. So there's a couple things there in terms of instability that you're trying to teach your athletes. Now, if I go ahead and look at arm action on this, arm action itself, it's an over-exaggeration drill when we do arm action, but your arms have mass and they're used to counteract the torque that's generated by the lower body. So you start off with straight arms more often than not, just to kind of work on shoulder mobility. Then you take the elbows to 90 degrees, and what you'll see is the hand swing will be from cheek to cheek, so roughly about cheek height to cheek down here. Arm swing to loosen up, 90 degrees, roughly cheek height to cheek. Cheek, 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 and I tend to run with a little bit of break in my wrist when I do that. It's just something I picked up a long time ago. And then you try to carry that arm action into other drills going forward. So this pushing up and through the big toe, you're teaching how to control your foot action and being arched forward, pushing up, back down, pushing up, not on the outside edges of the feet, pushing up through the big toe, pushing again up, pushing up, and trying to be comfortable in a nice heel up position. And you can, when the person gets better, they can transition to 1 foot as opposed to having 2 feet on that. But the 2 feet will make it more unstable, and you're teaching how to have good body control and where center of gravity is relative to the elevated center of gravity over to the contact patch on the ground that has become smaller. So with this, in terms of running technique, we talk about teaching the movement pattern first. This is a very low-grade exercise in terms of force production and force application. So you think of this with sprinting, we use muscles, we get stronger in the gym to be able to create more force, more potential energy, but you have to be efficient to be able to apply force into the ground to be able to get the most force out of the ground. It's a yield game, and I'll talk more about that. But this provides a low-grade dynamic warm-up that you can use as part of the running technique drills, and you'll notice the arm action is legit on this. We're okay here, 90 degrees, freezing, we're cheek to cheek, cheek to cheek. And think back to the sprinting mechanics that we saw earlier. Well, pause that and get these guys out of the way. We're in that high knee position, and the heel is by the opposite knee. That heel by the opposite knee, heel recovery is how high this heel is relative to the downside knee. So in this case, my right foot's on the ground, my heel is up and by the opposite knee. That's teaching that heel recovery position, and that is what begets other technique pointers down the road. But really what we're after here is teaching the overall movement pattern in a controlled environment where we freeze with each rep. All right, so now we get into a light skip. This is still part of ABC drills, it's just different components of it. And with this light skip, we're talking about the mechanics that we just went over, but now we're doing so in a higher load environment because we've picked up a tempo. The speed is increased. We're still arched forward, we're still on the balls of the feet, still have good arm action, about 90 degrees. Yep. And we're just kind of skipping across the floor, and you're teaching people how to spend less time on the floor with that timing component. Next up is heel to button. This is often done completely incorrectly. You have to teach your people when they're sprinting to be able to grip with the toes. And if they're running on cut grass, the cut grass should go up over their head, or if they're running on gravel, you would hear as they're actually digging with their toes. And you'll notice we're on the balls of the feet the whole time, and we're trying to get the heel up to the butt when we do this, but it's more about the mechanical side of the equation. And you notice there's a little bit of a cyclical movement as I'm actually bringing my feet down and I'm attacking the ground and gripping with my toes. It's not just plod, 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 plod into the ground. It's more active on the ground than reactive, and that's one of the key takeaways. So if we look at these side by side, what you just saw was this. Active, 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 active. This would be the slow plodding version. Plod, 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 plod. If you have athletes that are lazy, they'll get into this movement pattern with low heel recovery. They won't have what's called heel flick here. They're slouching here in the hips, and the knee isn't really good. The foot is flat when you actually want them here. You want them active, kicking themselves in the butt, active on the balls of the feet, and active on the ground. Active, active, never reactive. Get out of these guys. And that heel flick that I just mentioned is this. It's nothing more than another technical component, but it's kind of quirky. When we go ahead and do this heel flick, you're active on the ground, and you come up, and the heel actually has this. You go from dorsey to plantar, and that, in a quirky sort of way, when the person's running away from you, you'll no longer see the sole of their foot, you'll see the tip of their shoe, and I'll freeze this when it happens here in a second. Bum, bum, bum. Up you go, boink. So with this, notice you can see the sole of my shoe when we do the heel flick correctly. Hopefully it doesn't blur out too much. I end up having the heel, or the sole of my shoe, more up towards the ceiling as opposed towards the camera. So as a coach, this is one of those visible cue things that you work on, and you see the sole of their shoe, then they're not doing a good heel flick. If you can see the tip of the shoe and the sole of the shoe is actually towards the ceiling, then they're doing a really good heel flick. That's what you want from your athletes, because they're going to be mechanically much faster. And you can see the sole almost disappear on those last couple little reps there. All right. So those are just some of the basic pointers that you use when we're talking running technique drills. And it gets inherently more complex than that, especially when you work with people who are way faster than I could possibly be at this point in my life. But it really requires you to have a good eye. And I said it before with the box jumps, you can hear the difference when a person is running or doing these drills correctly. You can hear the timing component, the amortization phase is much shorter. It sounds poppy, it sounds explosive, it doesn't sound plotty and slow. And there's an active, not reactive component that you can actually hear as well as see. So I urge you as a coach to really start trying to refine your senses when you work with people. Moving on.